Hey, coaches. Some of the videos that I'm making right now are just out of sheer need based on how many times I'm asked the questions. And this is one of those videos where very frequently I'm asked the question, whether it's in class or by those who are just interested in the coaching field. I'm very often asked, how do you build your hours of experience towards your credential? It is a little bit hard sometimes to navigate what training to pursue, what's the reason you might start with a level 2 instead of a level 1, what credential you might best be suited for to get started, all that kind of stuff. But probably one of the tougher things is, how do you build the hours? Some are coming from organizations where they're already doing the hours, and that's great, but most individuals are starting from square one and need some help in figuring out how to get started in a right way, in a way that feels ethical, in a way that feels attainable. And hopefully with this video, we will take a look at a few options, help you select a few that might work best for you, and to also keep some things in mind as you are building your plan for building up your own coaching hours. So let's go ahead and get started with the video here today. And I'll resize that a little bit. There we go. So how do you build the hours? A few things to keep in mind with the ICF requirements and I'll do this a lot, you'll see a number / number. In order to earn an ACC credential associate or PCC credential professional with the International Coaching Federation, some requirements that you need to keep in mind. First off, your training hours, 60 hours for ACC, 125 hours for PCC, and in my opinion, the best way to get those hours would be through a level 1 program or level 2 program. Level 1s have to at least be 60 hours long of training, and level 2s have to be at least 125 training hours. Both would include the 10 hours of mentor coaching, which is also a requirement. And you also need to have performance evaluations. These are recordings that are submitted to the ICF directly, but if you're in a level 1 or 2 program, those are submitted to the training program, and they have to be approved by the end of that training program or by the ICF directly. They have to be approved, demonstrating that you are at the ACC or PCC level of performance. Now, like I was just indicating, all of these pieces can be accomplished through attending and completing a level 1 or level 2 training. You also have to keep in mind the coach credentialing exam, or used to be called the coach knowledge assessment. That's the multiple choice test that all coaches have to do when they're pursuing different credentials with the ICF. But the main thing that we're talking about here today is the 100 hours of experience required coaching people in real life engagements for an ACC, and 500 hours of experience for the PCC. Breaking those numbers down a little bit further, total hours, 100 total hours, 500 total hours for ACC and PCC, but 25 of those 100 hours can be pro bono, free coaching essentially. 50 hours pro bono for PCC. Now, I don't have this in the rest of the slides, but it is worth clarifying. For one, it's not required. Some coaches see the pro bono and see it as like requirement by the ICF to do volunteering. You don't have to do volunteering hours. These are to help coaches who are just getting started to have some footing, even though they're not going to be doing this for compensation. They're getting started in the field. So the little extra bit I want to add here is that when you are thinking about your hours and considering doing some free coaching, it's great to volunteer that coaching, but you might consider leaning that volunteering towards the kind of individuals, companies that you would like to work for in the future. So if you want to be an executive coach, how might you offer free coaching to executives or director level and above? If you're wanting to be an exercise coach, how might you use the free coaching to offer some sampler experiences for those who might be interested in paying for your services in future? So just be strategic with these pro bono hours. They don't just need to be free coaching generally. That's helpful for learning and experience. But it's important to make the most of your time. I often see coaches use the 25 and 50 pro bono hours for their required recordings. So maybe they'll do anywhere from 10 to 30 recordings during an entire coach training. Usually don't have to submit that many. It's good to have quite a few though, ready to go. And so some of these hours might be filled by recording calls. At least 75 hours of the 100, 450 hours of the 500 have to be compensated in some form. So this is usually where the real question lies. How do you build these hours? For one, what does compensated mean? Some sort of exchange of value. It could be very low monetary value, exchange for cash, and exchange for some services. It can also be. So I always joke coaching the accountant, and that accountant will tell you to make sure to file the bartered hours as part of your taxes. But that kind of exchange, they do some of your taxes, you do some of their coaching. That's a type of bartered and compensated hour. It can also be reciprocal coaching, where they coach you, you coach them. We'll talk about that in just a moment. You cannot count recording permission as an exchange of value. I actually do mention that to a client and encourage coaches to do that. In a way, it is to the client and to the coach some sort of exchange of value. It's just not able to be counted as such towards the ICF's expectations. I do think when you're offering pro bono coaching, saying that what you get out of it as coach is that you get these recorded sessions, and that's valuable to you. It's just not counted as compensation from the ICF's perspective. And these hours need to be a part of clear expectations. That needs to be a part of contract or work expectations, responsibilities that are understood so that the person you're coaching understands that you are using the skill in that relationship. That's really important because you can kind of practice coaching on anyone all the time. It's great to do active listening, open questioning, even scoping out a conversation before you get into it is great for everyday conversations, but you can't count, talking to your nephew for a few minutes using coaching skills as a coaching hour or coaching 30 minutes, unless it's contractual, unless you have some sort of agreement with them. Now, it's good to mention that you want to make sure you are tracking your hours with some sort of coaching log. You can see a link to that in the description or on the experience requirements page. And you count hours rounding to the nearest quarter of an hour. So just a few extra considerations. So key question, what you've been waiting for. Might have just skipped to this portion as well. What are your options for creating this set of 100 or 500 hours, especially for those compensated hours? So the most obvious first option is some sort of reciprocal coaching. Now the ICF has this on their site. If you're a part of a coach training, you can get into some sort of official reciprocal coaching. This is not like breakout session work that's a part of your live session experience with the coach training program. But as you do practice sessions with your fellow peer coaches in a training program, you can count those outside hours, outside of the live training hours. You can count those as reciprocal coaching. If you are coaching your fellow classmate and they are coaching you outside of the classes where you're just getting some good initial recordings and getting some good practice, and that is a form of exchange. And you can do this with any coach in the field where they are coaching you and you are coaching them. And it can be a good way to build your skills. Sometimes coaches are very hesitant to offer their coaching at all outside of some initial reciprocal coaching because they don't feel like they can ethically say they are ready to coach someone without some of this experience. And that's a fair point. It might be good to start with some good reciprocal coaching. It doesn't have to be free coaching though, because if you coach them, they coach you. That is a form of exchange, a compensated hour. Now, an alternative to this is having more than two people in that exchange. If I'm coach A and I coach coach B and coach B coaches coach C and coach C coaches me, that is also a form of reciprocal coaching. And that's also similar to what you see in other kind of programs where you're connecting around a circle of coaches where they're all providing value into the circle, and therefore it is a type of exchange. So that's another option. Option number 2, adjusted pricing. This is the most classic version where, as I'm getting started, I'm offering coaching for $5 an hour, $5 a session, $10 a session, $20 a session. Based on your platform, your experience, and what's expected of you. If you're an executive and you're just getting started as a coach, but people look up to you as if you would be an expert coach, because people assume that a coach is someone who has experience and they can kind of give them mentoring advice. Oftentimes, that kind of individual might be able to charge more, even though they're starting at the same level as someone who's fresh in the field and has never been an executive. The perception of value might be higher for the executive. So they might start at $50 an hour, and that's a very good price for what's the people who would be interested in hiring that coach. Others, just fresh into the field and they don't have much experience being like a manager, an executive, or someone who would naturally be seen as a full-on expert in the field. They might just be starting out at $5 an hour, $10 an hour. You don't want to price too cheap, but you don't want to price too high. You want to find a good price so that as you're getting some hours, you can raise that price as you're offering it and adjust that as you go so that your time is becoming more valuable. With this being said, it's good to try to give a limited amount of low-cost coaching so that you're not stuck in for a year at $5 an hour with 20 people. That's going to be too much work at that price. So, 6 sessions at a time per quarter with about 5 people might get you started. And you can run these calculations for yourself over a year, over a 2-year period of time. If you're going for 100 hours, how many hours a week, and how much would you want to charge for those hours every quarter? Something like that is something you can talk to with a coach trainer, coach supervisor, someone you see as a mentor in the coaching field who can help you find that sweet spot for your starting compensation. Another kind of coaching that can be compensated is internal coaching. If you are working with a company and you're a manager in that company, you are a business partner, you are someone who is in a support role, you might find that your natural responsibilities in that role are very close to coaching, and clearing those expectations of how you might use coaching skills as part of the function of your role, clearing that with your manager, clearing that with HR, just making sure you have leadership on board with that, how you might offer coaching skills as part of your work responsibilities is a type of compensated coaching. If this coaching comes under the umbrella of the contract of the full-time work that you're doing with them, then yeah, you can count that as coaching as long as you're not counting hours with your direct reports. If it's skip level, peers, dotted lines, those are fine. But if this is your direct report in a company, that's like the only stipulation. If you don't have direct reports, you can kind of ignore that. So it's got to be part of people's expectations. The person you're coaching needs to know that you're practicing on them. They need to understand the game, the rules of the game of coaching in comparison to other conversations you might have with them as individuals in the company. And as long as all those things are in play, yeah, you can count your internal coaching hours as part of compensated coaching. You would log those in an in-house log, and every, let's say 6 months, maybe every year, you'd want to have your leader sign off on a proof of how many hours you've done of coaching within the company. So just aligning with your leader, that template of not template, but the expectations of that letter that you would want to have on hand if ever audited by the ICF, all of that is found on the experience requirements page with the ICF. So internal coaching, very similar to this, would be sponsored organizations. I know this looks like a little boy in a very cute overalls, but this is a plug. We're plugging in to the sponsor organizations. This is a very big part of the coaching field now are the BetterUps, the Bravely's, Skillsoft, Coach Hub, Ezra Coaching, Lyra Health. So many of these organizations. Torch is one that I've been hearing about a lot recently. Tandem, I can kind of every year there's more organizations out there. Some fail, some are growing very well, going strong. These organizations sell contracts to companies, and they have a pool of coaches to connect them to. Now, this is separate from companies that are like Angie's List style companies where you're putting your information up and they're like a marketing channel for you. Here, we're talking about sponsoring organizations where they are making contracts with companies who become the sponsor, paying for the coaching for their team members. And so you are in the basket or bucket of coaches that the company's offering in exchange for the contract with the company. There's some oversight there, expectations about how that coaching is going to go. It is how I built my hours with an educational organization way back when, which is now flown. I don't know if they're doing anything like this anymore, but my main work, where I do my little hours every week, would be Better Up. That's how I like to fill my hours. I don't have to do any marketing. They take care of that. It's often lower compensation. I don't get paid what I might be able to get paid if I offer my services myself, but I also don't have to offer those services. I just get to focus on my coach training and do a little bit of coaching on the side. It's a really great way to build up your hours, but so many of these organizations do expect you to have some hours in the field before you apply. They often expect you to have some sort of credential in the field, at least an ACC. But sometimes you might be able to find your way in based on your experience and based on a demonstration of coaching skills. Now, finally, my favorite, the one you've been waiting for. This comes from a student who went through actually my very first pilot in the program years ago, and she built up her hours so quickly. It was surprising to me and really inspiring, and I was so proud of the work that she did. Her name is Justine, and she was able to get so many hours to earn her PCC within, I think, a 2.5, 3-year time frame, by doing pay what it's worth or beta contracts with companies. Now, you can do a pay what it's worth contract with an individual, but every time you're doing those, you have to kind of sell the idea of the contract to each individual person. Where this option 6 shines the most is going to a company, oftentimes a company where you have some sort of connections already. You know the person that's over learning and development. You know someone in HR. You know the owner of the company, maybe of a small or maybe medium-sized company. And things are going to be off cycle. It's not time to do the budget for learning and development, but they might appreciate some support when it comes to coaching their mid-level managers or their leaders. The idea here is you go to that individual and you say, hey, I'm wanting to continue to build my hours towards my credential, or I'm wanting to offer a beta experience for your company. And by the end of the program, the idea just for this beta phase would be to pay whatever it's worth, just some sort of compensation. Maybe you offer them at least this amount, but it just needs to be some sort of compensation for the overall hours. And then we can see if we want to go from there. We can expand it, we can shut it down, whatever we'd like to do. But this is a way for me to connect with the team that you already have, and it's off cycle, so you don't have to worry about much compensation at all. But it would give us something to work with as we look at the next fiscal year. This can open up so many hours. Let's say you offer to coach 10 people, 6 sessions, 6 hours each, over a quarter or 6-month period of time. Within that time, that one contract would represent 60 hours. Now, they might pay you the equivalent of 50 cents per hour if they only pay you a very small amount by the end of it, if that's what they pay what it's worth by the end of it. But that's still compensated. It gets you into the door. And the nice thing is it's a good way to do a true beta experience. And if it's of value to that organization, maybe they keep you on. So it makes a lot of business sense, and it also makes a lot of credentialing sense as you're trying to build up those hours to 500 hours for your PCC. The biggest drag on your time will be the time you put in to marketing and sales. And so the faster you can get into just coaching people, the better. And so this is something I've found many of the coaches ever since Justine have found very helpful. Some final considerations. Make sure that you keep a coaching log. Again, that's going to be in the experience requirements page with the ICF. The count of your hours begins at the start of your first ICF accredited coach training program. You might have already completed something like this. It has to be at least 30 hours or more, focusing on core competencies. Most begin counting their hours at the beginning of their first level 1 or level 2 program. My encouragement to coaches interested in the field is to begin with a level 2 program. That sounds silly. It's kind of like getting your bachelor's degree in the coaching field, though, because that's going to satisfy both the ACC and PCC level requirements for your training hours, mentor coaching, and performance evaluation. If you start with a level 1 program, get your ACC, and then in future go for your level 2 program, you'll be doubling up on your mentor coaching hours and your performance evaluations. So that oftentimes makes it more expensive. If you're interested in an ICF accredited coach training, by the way, feel free to check out the description here, connect with me on LinkedIn, check out my website. I'm focused on making coach training accessible so that we can make coaching accessible and get coaching for every professional, college student, high schooler, everyone in the world, so that we can build a better world together. That's my sales pitch. Review the ICF's experience requirements page. Final note there. All things are subject to change, so make sure to check out their site for final confirmation. But hopefully this gives you some sense of how you can build your hours as you're getting in the field. Let me know if you have any extra questions following up to this video or after this video. And just want to say thank you for considering stepping into this field. We really need more coaches in the world. Thank you for coaching.